Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
At a time of gloomy corporate sentiment, the Modi government has decided not to roll out the stringent CSR provisions that it had come up with and is also looking for ways to save foreign portfolio investors from the super rich surcharge. In Government Matters with me today, what we are going to look at is what the government is planning, what are the rollbacks that the government is thinking of, and why this change of heart. In the studio with me, I have Ramya Nair, who is our in-house expert for the economy. Ramya, so we know that through the amendment to the Companies Act, the government had brought in fairly stringent provisions to ensure that companies spend on CSR. It had also in the budget imposed a surcharge on the super rich, and all of it has added to the dampening of corporate sentiment. Can you tell me what are the rollbacks that the government is now thinking of?
First we'll talking about the surcharge on foreign portfolio investors. It was mainly meant as a tax on the super rich.
Right.
So they basically increased the surcharge, increasing the effective tax rates in the range of 39% to 42%. So those who earned more than rupees 5 crore had an effective tax rate of almost 42.7%.
Right.
So what happened was that the FPIs also got involved into this, as in basically because FPIs who invest as trusts, this tax was applicable on them.
Right.
So that is one measure that the government is now thinking of rolling back, but it is a budget announcement and one needs to see how, it's a finance bill has now been enacted.
How do you roll it back?
How do you roll it back? That needs to be seen. So the government was initially, they had said that, okay, FPIs always have an option of coming in and changing their structures and coming back as a corporate rather than as a trust structure, but obviously that didn't go very well with FPIs.
Right.
So now there seems to be a rethink on that. The other thing is on the CSR provisions and penalties. So, it was a long-standing demand of the companies that CSR should be made as a tax deductible expenditure.
Right.
So, basically what companies invest as CSR should be allowed to be deducted from their revenues before the tax calculations are done. So, that was a demand, that was a long-pending demand, but the government had never entertained it. That was another thing was the recent amendments to the Companies Act, which brought in penal provisions for not meeting the CSR requirements. So there they talked about on how if companies are not able to meet that thing and meet that investment and the subsequent how this funds will have to be now put into a
escrow account,
and then this amount will have to be transferred to the government within 3 years. If they're not able to spend that money. So what has now happened is, and at that time they talked about on how there will be a either an imprisonment up to 3 years or a penalty of up to rupees 25 lakhs. So a committee under the Corporate Affairs Secretary Injeti Srinivas has submitted a report yesterday, which is basically talking about on how there will be penal provisions, but that will not include imprisonment. So they're talking about on how companies could be levied a penalty of 1.5 to 2 times the amount on which they're not spending. But they're saying that let's not talk about imprisonment.
Right.
So that is and if the government hasn't officially announced that
but there is
they
a
will
thinking,
roll back.
But
but there is obviously because
but we can safely say that it's a dilution on both fronts of the government's stand.
The dilution is being planned because the government was really brazen about it, like say 2-3 weeks back.
So that is my question, Ramya, and you've hit the nail on its head that the government was so brazen and the government was so reluctant to to do a review. How is it that suddenly there's a rethink? Where does this change of heart come from?
I think the government didn't anticipate the level of backlash that they will face over these two decisions. So in terms of the FPI investments, they thought that yes, the markets will gradually recover. So the markets had crashed and they thought that it's a temporary thing and the foreign portfolio investors will come back into and invest in the market. That hasn't happened. The stock markets have lost nearly more than 5 lakh crore in market capitalization. So that they've wiped out a lot of wealth.
Right.
Also, how stock markets perform is very important for the government to meet its disinvestment targets. They have to sell their stakes in many of these enterprises to raise the disinvestment, to meet that ambitious disinvestment target that we're talking about. So because of this, the government does need the markets to perform well. So I think there is an acknowledgement there. On the CSR front, they have received a lot of backlash from companies and even known sympathizers of the government. You know, you have people like Mohandas Pai who have openly come out against these kind of penal provisions and said, you know, why bring in the criminal aspect into these laws? So I think the kind of backlash that they have faced has forced them to have a rethink on these.
But Ramya, you follow the economy so closely, you follow the corporate sector. Do you think if the rollback happens, or if, you know, the government does not implement any of these, is it enough to revive corporate sentiment?
It will be the first step, but obviously much more needs to be done. And you know, private sector, encouraging private sector investment will remain the key for the government to kickstart the economy. The economy, the numbers that are coming in are not at all encouraging. We have recently, like yesterday, the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers announced their auto sale numbers, you know, and automobile sales have fallen to a 2-decade low. So, you know, these are like the challenges that the economy is facing. You have FMCG companies who have been announcing their results, talking about a sharp fall in volumes. So the situation seems pretty bad. The RBI has also acknowledged there's that, you know, we're talking about a massive growth slowdown and there needs to be some support. So, you know, you encouraging companies to invest, promising them a stable environment in terms of the tax laws or other prevailing laws will be the first step, to build that kind of investor confidence that is needed.
Absolutely. But in that sense, Ramya, you know, this government has always talked about how it wants to facilitate ease of doing business, and on the other hand, it brings in provisions like the ones we've chatted about in this conversation. Is it sending out mixed signals about how it wants to enable business in the country?
It does seem so, you know, because if you go back to the budget speech of Nirmala Sitharaman, you know, the first thing that in the initial part of her speech, the first thing that she said was, we want to work with industry, you know, let's both of us work into building India as a nation. So the whole thing was, you know, that we are friends. That was the message that she sent out in her initial part of the budget speech. And then, you know, the budget measures followed them, and that may not have really backed up her thing, and then, you know, followed by these CSR norms. So it does seem that, you know, the government talks a lot about ease of doing business, has obviously announced a lot of steps here and there to improve the ease of doing business in terms of, you know, relaxing the way the companies can incorporate themselves, or in terms of how companies can pay taxes and those kind of things. But, you know, there are some things that keep on cropping up here and there. When it talks about, you know, it's not that easy to do business in India. This whole conversation about tax terrorism also now come in after the suicide of the cafe coffee day founder Vijay Siddhartha. So, you know, these kind of questions keep recurring, and the government may not have been able to adequately address all these concerns.
Well, clearly, as you said, mixed signals is what the government seems to be sending out. That was Ramya Nair explaining to us what rollbacks the government is planning to make it easier for corporates and to sort of revive corporate sentiment, and why the government is now forced to do so. Thank you for watching Government Matters.